The concept of progress acts as a protective mechanism to shield us from the terrors of the future. From collected sayings of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. On his 17th birthday, Feyd Rautha Harkonnen killed his 100th slave gladiator in the family games. Visiting observers from the imperial court, Count and Lady Fenring, were on the Harkonnen homeworld of Geidi Prime for the event. Invited to sit that afternoon with the immediate family in the golden box above the triangular arena. In honor of the Baron's nativity, and to remind all Harkonnens and subjects that Feyd Rautha was heir designant. It was a holiday on Geidi Prime. The old Baron had decreed a meridian to meridian rest from labors, and effort had been spent in the family city of Harco to create the illusion of gaiety. Banners flew from buildings. New paint had been splashed on the walls along the courtway. But off the main way, Count Fenring and his lady, the rubbish heaps, the scabrous brown walls reflected in the dark puddles of the streets, and the furtive scurrying of the people. In the Baron's blue-walled keep, there was fearful perfection. But the Count and his lady saw the price being paid. Guards everywhere, and weapons with that special sheen that told the trained eye they were in regular use. There were checkpoints for routine passage from area to area, even when the keep. The servants revealed their military training in the way they walked, in the set of their shoulders, in the way their eyes watched and watched and watched. The pressure's on, the Count hummed to his lady in their secret language. The Baron is just beginning to see the price he really paid to rid himself of the Duke Leto. Sometime I must recount for you the legend of the Phoenix, she said. They were in the reception hall of the keep waiting to go to the family games. It was not a large hall, perhaps 40 meters long and half that in width. But false pillars along the sides have been shaped with an abrupt taper, and the ceiling has subtle arch, all giving the illusion of much greater space. Ah, here comes the Baron, the Count said. The Baron moved down the length of the hall with that particular waddling glide, impaired by the necessities of guiding suspensor-hung weight. His jowls bobbed up and down. The suspensors jiggled and shifted beneath his orange robe. Rings glared on his hands, and opifers shone where they had been woven into the robe. At the Baron's elbow walked Feyd Rautha. His dark hair was dressed in close ringlets that seemed incongruously gay above sullen eyes. He wore a tight-fitting black tunic and snug trousers with a suggestion of bell at the bottom. Soft-soled slippers covered his small feet. Lady Fenring, knowing the young man's poise and the sure flow of muscles beneath the tunic, thought, "Here's one who won't let himself go to fat." The Baron stopped in front of them, took Feyd Rautha's arm in a possessive grip, said, "My nephew, Baron Feyd Rautha Hakunin." And turning his baby-fat face toward Feyd Rautha, he said, "The Count and Lady Fenring of whom I've spoken." Feyd Rautha dipped his head with the required courtesy. He stared at Lady Fenring. She was golden-haired and willowy, her perfection of figure clothed in a flowing gown of ecru. Simple fitness of form without ornament. Gray-green eyes stared back at him. She had that Bene Gesserit's serene repose about her that the young man found subtly disturbing. Said the Count. He studied Feyd Rautha. The precise young man. I may... Dear? The Count glanced at the Baron. "My dear Baron, you say you've spoken of us to this precise young man. What did you say?" "I told my nephew of the great esteem our Emperor holds for you, Count Fenring," the Baron said, and he thought, "Mark him well, Feyd. A killer with the manners of a rabbit. This is the most dangerous kind." "Of course," said the Count. He smiled at his lady. Feyd Rautha found the man's actions and words almost insulting. They stopped just short of something overt that would require notice. The young man focused his attention on the Count. A small man, weak-looking. The face was weaselish, with overlarge dark eyes. There was gray at the temples. In his movements, he moved a hand or turned his head one way. Then he spoke another way. It was difficult to follow. You come upon such preciseness so rarely," the Count said, addressing the Baron's shoulder. "I congratulate you on the perfection of your hair. In the light of the elder, one might say. You're too kind," the Baron said. He bowed, but Feyd Rautha noted that his uncle's eyes did not agree with the courtesy. When you're, ironic, that, suggests you're, thinking deep thoughts. The Count said. There he goes again, Feyd Rautha thought. It sounds like he's being insulting, but there's nothing you can call out for satisfaction. Listening to the man gave Feyd Rautha the feeling that his head was being pushed through mush. Feyd Rautha turned his attention back to Lady Fenring. We're taking up too much of this young man's time, she said. I understand he's to appear in the arena today. By the hours of the Imperial harem, she's a lovely one, Feyd Rautha thought. He said, I shall make a kill for you this day, my lady. I shall make the dedication in the arena with your permission. She returned to stare serenely, but her voice carried whiplash as she said, You not have my permission. Feyd, the Baron said, and he thought, that imp. Does he want this deadly Count to call him out? But the Count only smiled and said, You really must be getting ready for the arena, Feyd, the Baron said. You must be rested and not take any foolish risks. Feyd Rautha bowed, his face dark with resentment. I'm sure everything will be as you wish, Uncle. He nodded to Count Fenring. Sir, to the lady, my lady. And he turned and strode out of the hall, barely glancing at the knot of families minor near the double doors. He's so young, the Baron sighed. Indeed. The Count said. And Lady Fenring thought, can this not be the young man that the Reverend Mother meant? Is that a bloodline we must preserve? We've more than an hour before going to the arena, the Baron said. Perhaps we could have our little talk now, Count Fenring. He tipped his gross head to the right. There's a considerable amount of progress to be discussed. And the Baron thought, let's see how the Emperor's errand boy gets across whatever message he carries without ever being so crass as to speak it right out. The Count spoke to his lady. You will excuse us, my dear. Each day, sometime each hour brings change, she said. And she smiled sweetly at the Baron before turning away. Her long skirts swished, and she walked with a straight-backed, regal stride toward the double doors at the end of the hall. The Baron noted how all conversation among the houses minor there stopped at her approach, how the eyes followed her. Bene Gesserit, the Baron thought. The universe will be better rid of them all. There's a cone of silence between the two pillars over there. Over here on our left, the Baron said. We can talk there without fear of being overheard. He led the way with his waddling gait to the sound-deafening field, feeling the noises of the keep become dull and distant. The Count moved up beside the Baron, and they turned, facing the wall, so their lips could not be read. We're not satisfied with the way you ordered the Sarkar off Arrakis. The Count said. Straight talk. The Baron thought. The Sarkar could not stay longer without risking that others would find out how the Emperor helped me. The Baron said. But your nephew Rabban does not appear to be pressing strongly enough toward the solution of the Fremen problem. What does the Emperor wish? The Baron asked. There cannot be more than a handful of Fremen left on Arrakis. The southern desert is uninhabitable. The northern desert is swept regularly by our patrols. Who says the southern desert is uninhabitable? Your own planetologist said it, my dear Count. But Dr. Kynes is dead. Ah, yes. Unfortunate that. We've word from an overflight across the southern reaches. The Count said, there is evidence of plant life. Has the Guild then agreed to watch from space? You know better than that, Baron. The Emperor cannot legally post a watch on Arrakis. And I cannot afford it, the Baron said. Who made this overflight? Smuggler. Someone has lied to you, Count, the Baron said. Smugglers cannot navigate the southern reaches any better than can Rabban's men. Storms, sandstack, and all that, you know. Navigation markers are knocked out faster than they can be installed. We'll discuss various types of stack another time, the Count said. The Baron thought, have you found some mistake in my accounting, then? He demanded. When you imagine mistakes, there can be no self-defense, the Count said. He's deliberately trying to arouse my anger, the Baron thought. He took 2 deep breaths to calm himself. He could smell his own sweat, and the harnesses Spencer's beneath his robe felt suddenly itchy and galling. The Emperor cannot be unhappy about the death of the concubine and the boy, the Baron said. They fled into the desert. There was a storm. Yes, there were so many convenient accidents, the Count agreed. I do not like your tone, Count, the Baron said. Anger is one thing, violence is another, the Count said. Let me caution you, should an unfortunate accident occur to me here in the great houses, all would learn what you did on Arrakis. They've long suspected you and how you do business. The only recent business I can recall, the Baron said, was transportation of several legions of Sarkar to Arrakis. You think you could hold that over the Emperor's head? I wouldn't think of it. The Count smiled. Sarkar commanders could be found who'd confess they acted without orders because they wanted a battle with your Fremen scum. Many might doubt such a confession, the Baron said, but the threat staggered him. Are Sardaukar truly that disciplined, he wondered? The Emperor does wish to audit your books, the Count said. Any time. You, have no objections? None. My Chum Company directorship will bear the closest scrutiny, he thought. Let him bring a false accusation against me and have it exposed. I shall stand there, Prometheans, saying, behold me, I am wronged. Then let him bring any other accusation against me, even a true one. The great houses will not believe a second attack from an accuser once proved wrong. No doubt your books will bear the closest scrutiny, the Count murmured. Why is the Emperor so interested in exterminating the Fremen? The Baron asked. You wish the subject to be changed, huh? The Count shrugged. It is the Sarkar who wish it, not the Emperor. They needed practice in killing, and they hate to see a task left undone. Does he think to frighten me by reminding me that he is supported by bloodthirsty killers? The Baron wondered. A certain amount of killing has always been an arm of business, the Baron said. But a line has to be drawn somewhere. Someone must be left to work the spice. The Count emitted a short, barking laugh. You think you can harness the Fremen? There never were enough of them for that, the Baron said. But the killing has made the rest of my population uneasy. It's reaching the point where I'm considering another solution to the arcane problem, my dear Fenring. And I must confess that the Emperor deserves credit for the inspiration. Huh? You see, Count, I have the Emperor's prison planet, Secundus, to inspire me. The Count stared at him with glittering intensity. What possible connection is there between Arrakis and Secundus? The Baron felt the alertness in Fenring's eyes, said, No connection yet. Yet? You must admit it'd be a way to develop a substantial workforce on Arrakis. To use the place as a prison plant. You anticipate an increase in prisoners? There has been unrest, the Baron admitted. I've had to squeeze rather severely, Fenring. After all, you know the price I paid that damnable guild to transport our mutual force to Arrakis. That money has to come from somewhere. I suggest you not use Arrakis' prison plant without the Emperor's permission, Baron. Of course not, the Baron said, and he wondered at the sudden chill in Fenring's voice. Another matter, the Count said. We learned that Duke Leto's mentat, Feyd Rautha, is not dead, but in your employ. I could not bring myself to waste him, the Baron said. You lied to our Sardaukar commander when you said Hawat was dead. Only a white lie, my dear Count. I hadn't the stomach for a long argument with the man. Was Hawat the real traitor? Oh, goodness, no. It was the false doctor. The Baron wiped at perspiration on his neck. You must understand, Fenring. I was without a mentat. You know that. I've never been without a mentat. It was most unsettling. How could you get Hawat to shift allegiance? His duke was dead. The Baron forced a smile. There's nothing to fear from Hawat, my dear Count. The mentat's flesh has been impregnated with a latent poison. We administer an antidote in his meals. Without the antidote, the poison is triggered. He'll die in a few days. Withdraw the antidote, the Count said. But he's useful, and he knows too many things so no living man should know. You said the Emperor doesn't fear exposure. Don't play games with me, Baron. When I see such an order above the Imperial seal, I'll obey it, the Baron said, but I'll not submit to your whim. You think it whim? What else can it be? The Emperor has obligations to me, too. Fenring. I rid him of the troublesome Duke with the help of a few Sardaukar. Where else would the Emperor have found a house to provide the disgusting uniforms to aid his end in this matter? He has asked himself the same question, Baron, but with a slightly different emphasis. The Baron studied Fenring, knowing the stiffness of jaw muscles, the careful control. Now, the Baron said, I hope the Emperor doesn't believe he can move against me in total secrecy. He hopes it won't become necessary. The Emperor cannot believe I threatened him. The Baron permitted anger and grief to edge his voice, thinking, let him wrong me in that. I could place myself on the throne while still beating my breast over how I'd been wronged. The Count's voice went dry and remote as he said, the Emperor believes what his senses tell him. Dare the Emperor charge me with treason before I ruffle Lansrad Council? And the Baron held his breath with the hope of it. The Emperor need dare nothing. The Baron whirled away in his suspensors to hide his expression. It could happen in my lifetime, he thought. Emperor, let him wrong me. Then, the bribes and coercion, the rallying of the great houses, they'd flock to my banner like peasants running for shelter. The thing they feared above all else is the Emperor's Sardaukar loosed upon them, one house at a time. It is the Emperor's sincere hope that he'll never have to charge you with treason, the Count said. The Baron found it difficult to keep irony out of his voice and permit only the expression of hurt, but he managed. I have been a most loyal subject. These words hurt me beyond my capacity to express. Said the Count. The Baron kept his back to the Count, nodding. Presently, he said, It's time to go to the arena. Indeed, said the Count. They moved out of the cone of silence and, side by side, walked toward the clumps of houses minor at the end of the hall. A bell began a low tolling somewhere in the keep. 20-minute warning for the arena gathering. The houses minor wait for you to lead them, the Count said, nodding toward the people they approached. Double meeting, the Baron thought. He looked up at the new talismans flanking the exit to his hall. The mad bull's head and the oil painting of the old Duke Atreides, the late Duke Leto's father. They filled the Baron with an odd sense of foreboding. And he wondered what thoughts these talismans had inspired in the Duke Leo as they hung in the halls of Kaladin and then on Arrakis. The Bravura father and the head of the bull that had killed him. Mankind is only one science. The Count says they picked up their parade of followers and emerged from the hall into the waiting room. A narrow space with high windows and floor of patterned white and purple tile. And what science is that? The Baron asked. It's the science of discontent. The Count said. The houses mire behind them, sheep-faced and responsive, laughed with just the right tone of appreciation, but the sound carried a note of discord as it collided with the sudden blast of motors that came to them when the pages threw open the outer doors, revealing the line of ground cars. Their guiding pants whipping in the breeze. The Baron raised his voice to surmount the sudden noise. Said, "I hope you'll not be discontented with the performance of my nephew today, Count Fenring. I filled him only with sense of anticipation, yes," the Count said. "Always in the process verbal, one must consider the office of origin." The Baron hid sudden stiffening of surprise by stumbling on the first step down from the exit. Process verbal. That was a report of a crime against the Imperium. But the Count chuckled to make it seem a joke and patted the Baron's arm. All the way to the arena, though, the Baron sat back among the armored cushions of his car, casting covert glances at the Count beside him, wondering why the Emperor's errand boy had thought it necessary to make that particular kind of joke in front of the house's minor. It was obvious that Fenring seldom did anything he felt to be unnecessary, or used two words where one would do, or held himself to a single meaning in a single phrase. They were seated in the golden box above the triangular arena, horns blaring, the tiers above and around them jammed with a hubbub of people and waving pennants. When the answer came to the Baron. "My dear Baron," the Count said, leaning close to his ear, "you know, don't you, that the Emperor has not given official sanction to your choice of heir?" The Baron felt himself to be within a sudden personal cone of silence, produced by his own shock. He stared at Fenring, barely seeing the Count's lady come through the guards beyond to join the party in the golden box. "That's really why I'm here today," the Count said. "The Emperor wishes me to report on whether you've chosen a worthy successor. There is nothing like the arena to expose the true person from beneath the mask, eh? The Emperor promised me free choice of heir." The Baron grayed. "We shall see," Fenring said, and turned away to greet his lady. She sat down, smiling at the Baron, then giving her attention to the sand floor beneath them, where Feyd Rautha was emerging in gauze and tights. The black glove and the long knife in his right hand, the white glove and the short knife in his left hand. "White for poison, black for purity," the Lady Fenring said. "A curious custom, isn't it, my love?" the Count said. The greeting cheer lifted from the family galleries, and Feyd Rautha paused to accept it, looking up and scanning the faces, seeing his cousins and cousins, the demi-brothers, the concubines, and outframed relations. There were so many pink trumpet mouths yammering amidst a flare of colorful clothing and banners. It came to Feyd Rautha then that the packed ranks of faces would look just as vividly at his blood as at that of the slave gladiator. There was no doubt of the outcome in this fight, of course. Here was only the form of danger without its substance. Yet, Feyd Rautha held up his knives to the sun, saluted the three corners of the arena in the ancient manner. The short knife in the white-gloved hand, White, the sign of poison, went first into its sheath. Then the long blade, in the black-gloved hand, the pure blade that now was unpure, his secret weapon to turn this day into a purely personal victory. Poison on the black blade. The adjustment of his body shield took only a moment, and he paused to sense the skin tightening at his forehead, assuring him he was properly guarded. This moment carried its own suspense, and Feyd Rautha dragged it out with the sure hand of a showman, nodding to his handlers and distractors, to checking their equipment with a measuring stare, Gives it in place with their prickles sharp and glistening, the barbs and hooks waving with their blue streamers. Feyd Rautha signaled the musicians. The slow march began, sonorous with its ancient pomp, and Feyd Rautha led his troop across the arena for obeisance at the foot of his uncle's box. He caught the ceremonial key as it was thrown. The music stopped. Into the abrupt silence, he stepped back 2 paces, raised the key, and shied. I dedicate this truth to... And he paused, knowing his uncle would think the young fool's going to dedicate to Lady Fenring after all and cause a ruckus. To my uncle and patron, the Baron Vladimir Arkonin. Feyd Rautha shied, and he was delighted to see his uncle sigh. The music resumed at the quick march, and Feyd Rautha led his men, scampering back across the arena to the Prudence door that admitted only those wearing the proper identification band. Feyd Rautha prided himself that he never used the Prue door and seldom needed distractors. But it was good to know they were available this day. Special plans sometimes involve special dangers. Again, silence settled over the arena. Feyd Rautha turned, faced the big red door across from him, through which the gladiator would emerge. The special gladiator. The plan Feyd Rautha had devised was admirably simple and direct. Feyd Rautha thought. The slave would not be drugged. That was the danger. Instead, a key word had been drummed into the man's unconscious. To immobilize his muscles at a critical instant. Feyd Rautha rolled the vile word in his mind, mouthing it without a sound. Scum. To the audience, it would appear that an undrugged slave had been slipped into the arena to kill the Baron, and all the carefully arranged evidence would point to the slave master. A low humming arose from the red doors several murs as they were armed for opening. Feyd Rautha focused all his awareness on the door. This first moment was the critical one. The appearance of the gladiator as he emerged told the trained eye much it needed to know. All gladiators were supposed to be hyped on a lacquer drug to come out kill ready in fighting stance, but you had to watch how they hefted the knife. Which way they turned in defense. Whether they were actually aware of the audience in the stands. The way a slave cocked his head could give the most vital clue to counter and feint. The red doors slammed open. Out charged a tall, muscular man with shaved head and darkly pitted eyes. His skin was carrot-colored, as it should be from the Ilaka drug. But Feyd Rautha knew the color was paint. The slave wore green leotards and the red belt of a semi-shield. The belt's arrow pointing left to indicate the slave's left side was shielded. He held his knife sword fashion, cocked slightly outward in the stance of a trained fighter. Slowly, he advanced into the arena, turning his shield shielded side toward Feyd Rautha and the group at the brew door. "I like not the look of this one," said one of Feyd Rautha's barbmen. "Are you sure he's drugged, my lord?" "He has the color." Feyd Rautha said. "Yet he stands like a fighter," said another helper. Feyd Rautha advanced 2 steps onto the sand, studied the slave. "What has he done to his arm?" asked one of the distractors. Feyd Rautha's attention went to a bloody scratch on the man's left forearm. Followed the arm down to the hand as it pointed to a design drawn in blood on the left hip of the green leotards. A wet shape there. The formalized outline of a hawk. Feyd Rautha looked up into the darkly pitted eyes, saw them glaring at him with uncommon alertness. "It's one of Duke Glato's fighting men we took on Arrakis," Feyd Rautha thought. No simple gladiator, this. A chill ran through him, and he wondered if Howard had another plan for this arena. A feint within a feint within a feint, and only the slave master prepared to take the blame. Feyd Rautha's chief handler spoke at his ear. "I like not the look of that on that one, my lord. Let me set a barb or 2 in his knife arm to try him." "I'll set my own barbs," Feyd Rautha said. He took a pair of the long hooked shafts from the handler, hefted them, testing the balance. These barbs, too, were supposed to be drugged, but not this time, and the chief handler might die because of that. But it was all part of the plan. "You'll come out of this a hero," Howitz had said. "Killed your gladiator man to man, and in spite of treachery, the slave master will be executed, and your man will step up into his spot." Feyd Rautha advanced another 5 paces into the arena, playing out the moment, studying the slave. Already he knew the experts in the stands above him were aware that something was wrong. The gladiator had the correct skin color for a drugged man, but he stood his ground and did not tremble. The aficionados would be whispering among themselves now. "See how he stands. He should be agitated, attacking or retreating. See how he conserves his strength, how he waits. He should not wait." Feyd Rautha felt his own excitement kindle. Let there be treachery in Howard's mind, he thought. I can handle this slave. And it's my long knife that carries the poison this time, not the short one. Even Howard doesn't know that. "Hi, hot honored," the slave called. "Are you prepared to die?" Deathly stillness gripped the arena. Slaves did not issue the challenge. Now, Feyd Rautha had to be in a clear view of the gladiator's eyes. Saw the cold ferocity of despair in them. He marked the way the man stood, loose and ready, muscles prepared for victory. The slave grapevine had carried Howard's message to this one. You'll get a true chance to kill the Na Baron. That much of a scheme was as they'd planned it then. A tight smile crossed Feyd Rautha's mouth. He lifted the barbs, seeing success for his plans in the way the gladiator stood. "Hi, hi!" the slave challenged, and crept forward 2 steps. No one in the galleries can mistake it now, Feyd Rautha thought. This slave should have been partly crippled by drug-induced terror. Every movement should have betrayed his inner knowledge that there was no hope for him. He could not win. He should have been filled with the stories of the poisons that the Na Baron chose for the blade in his white-gloved hand. The Na Baron never get a quick death, but delighted in demonstrating rare poisons. Could stand in the arena pointing out interesting side effects on the writhing victim. There was fear in the slave, yes, but not terror. Feyd Rautha lifted the barbs high, nodded in almost greeting. The gladiator pounced. His feint and defensive counter were as good as any Feyd Rautha had ever seen. A timed side blow missed by the barest fraction from severing the tendons of the Na Baron's left leg. Feyd Rautha danced away, leaving a barbed shaft in the slave's right forearm. The hooks completely buried in the flesh, where the man could not withdraw them without ripping tendons. A concerted gasp lifted from the galleries. The sound filled Feyd Rautha with elation. He knew now what his uncle was experiencing, sitting up there with the Fenrings, the observers from the imperial court beside him. There could be no interference with this fight. The forms must be observed in front of witnesses, and the Baron would interpret the events in the arena only one way: threat to himself. The slave backed, holding knife in teeth and lashing the barbed shaft to his arm with the pennant. "I do not feel your needle," he shied. Again he crept forward, knife ready. Left side presented, his body bent backward to give it the grayish surface of protection from the half-shield. The action, too, didn't escape the galleries. Sharp cries came from the family boxes. Feyd Rautha's handlers were called out to ask if he needed them. He waved them back to the crew door. I'll give them a show such as they've never had before, Feyd Rautha thought. No team killing where they can sit back and admire the style. This will be something to take them by the guts and twist them. When I'm Baron, they'll remember this day, and won't be a one of them can escape fear of me because of this day. Feyd Rautha gave ground slowly before the glidier's crab-like advance. Arena sand grated underfoot. He heard the slaves panting, smelled his own sweat, and a faint odor of blood in the air. Steadily, the Baron moved backward, turning to the right. His second barb ray. The slave danced sideways. Feyd Rautha appeared to stumble. Heard the scream from the galleries. Again, the slave pounced. Gods, what a fighting man. Feyd Rautha thought as he leapt aside. Only youth's quickness saved him, but he left the second barb buried in the deltoid muscle of the slave's right arm. Shrill cheers rained from the galleries. They cheer me now, Feyd Rautha thought. He heard the wildness in the voices, just as how I had said he would. They'd never cheered a family fighter that way before, and he thought with an edge of grimness on a thing how I had told him. It's easier to be terrified by an enemy you admire. Swiftly, Feyd Rautha retreated to the center of the arena where all could see clearly. He drew his long blade, crouched, and waited for the advancing slave. The man took only the time to lash the second barbed knife to his arm, then sped in pursuit. Let the family see me do this thing, Feyd Rautha thought. I am their enemy. Let them think of me as they see me now. He drew his short blade. I do not fear you, Harkonnen swine, the gladiator said. Your tortures cannot hurt a dead man. I can be dead on my own blade or an antler lays fingers into my flesh. And I'll have you dead beside me. Feyd Rautha grinned, offered now the long blade, the one with the poison. Try this on, he said, and Feyd with the short blade in his other hand. The slave shifted knife hands, turned inside, and both parry and feint to grapple the Nabarn's short blade, the one in the white-gloved hand that tradition said should carry the poison. Now you will die, Harkonnen. The gladiator gasped. They struggled sideways across the sand, where Feyd Rautha's shield met the slave's half-shield. A blue glow marked the contact. The air around them filled with ozone on the field. Die on your own poison, the slave grated. He began forcing the white-gloved hand inward, turning the blade he thought carried the poison. Let them see this, Feyd Rautha thought. He brought down the long blade, felt it clang uselessly against the barbed shaft, lashed to the slave's arm. Feyd Rautha felt a moment of desperation. He had not thought the barbed shaft would be an advantage. This would be an advantage for the slave, but they gave the man another shield. And the strength of this gladiator, the short blade, was being forced inward inexorably, and Feyd Rautha focused on the fact that a man could also die on an unpoisoned blade. Scum! Feyd Rautha gasped. At that key word, the gladiator's muscles obeyed with a momentary slackness. It was enough for Feyd Rautha. He opened a space between them, sufficient for the long blade. Its poisoned tip flicked out, drew a red line on the slave's chest. There was instant agony in the poison. The man disengaged himself, staggered backward. Now let my dear family watch, Feyd Rautha thought. Let them think on this slave who tried to turn the knife he thought poisoned and use it against me. Let them wonder how a gladiator could come to this arena ready for such an attempt. Let them always be aware they cannot know for sure which of my hands carries the poison. Feyd Rautha stood in silence, watching the slowed motion of the slave. The man moved within a hesitation awareness. There was an orthographic thing on his face now for every watcher to recognize. The death was written there. The slave knew it had been done to him, and he knew how it had been done. The wrong blade had carried the poison. You! The man moaned. Feyd Rautha drew back to give death its space. The paralyzing drug and the poison had yet to take full effect. But the man's slowness told of its advance. The slave staggered forward, as though drawn by a string, one dragging step at a time. Each step was the only step in the universe, in his universe. He still clutched his knife, but its point wavered. One of us will get you, he gasped. A sad little moan contorted his mouth. He sagged, then stiffened and rolled away from Feyd Rautha, face down. Feyd Rautha advanced in the silent arena, put a toe under the gladiator, and rolled him onto his back to give the galleries a clear view of the face when the poison began its twisting, wrenching work on the muscles. But the gladiator came over with his own knife, protruding from his breast. In spite of frustration, there was for Feyd Rautha a measure of admiration for the effort this slave had managed in overcoming the paralysis to do this thing to himself. With the admiration came the realization that here was truly a thing to fear. That which makes a man superhuman is terrifying. As he focused on this thought, Feyd Rautha became conscious of the eruption of noise from the stands and galleries around him. They were cheering with utter abandon. Feyd Rautha turned, looking up at them. All were cheering except the Baron, who sat with hand to chin in deep contemplation, and the Count and his lady, both of whom were staring down at him, their faces masked by smiles. Count Fenring turned to his lady, said, resourceful young man. Hey, my dear. His skeptic responses are very swift, she said. The Baron looked at her, at the Count, returned his attention to the arena, thinking, if someone could get that close to one of mine. Rage began to replace his fear. I'll have the slave master dead over with slow fire this night. And if this Count and his lady had a hand in it. The conversation in the Baron's box was remote. Movement to fit Feyd Rautha. The voices drowned in the foot-stamping chant that came now from all around. Head, 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 head. The Baron scowled, seeing the way Feyd Rautha turned to him. Languidly controlling his rage with difficulty, the Baron waved his hand toward the young man standing in the arena beside the sprawled body of the slave. Give the boy a head. He earned it by exposing the slave master. Feyd Rautha saw the signal of agreement, thought, they think they honor me. Let them see what I think. He saw his handlers approaching with a saw knife to do the honors. waved them back, repeated the gesture as they hesitated. They think they honor me with just a head, he thought. He bent and crossed the gladiator's hands around the protruding knife handle, then removed the knife and placed it in the limp hands. It was done in an instant, and he straightened, beckoned his handlers. Bury the slave intact with his knife in his hands, he said. The man earned it. In the golden box, Count Fenring leaned close to the Baron, said, "A grand gesture that. True bravura. Your nephew has style as well as courage." "He insults the crowd by refusing the head," the Baron muttered. "Not at all," Lady Fenring said. She turned, looking up at the ears around them. The Baron nudged the line of her neck. A truly lovely flowing of muscles, like the young boys. "They like what your nephew did," she said. As the import of Feyd Rautha's gesture penetrated to the most distant seats, as the people saw the handlers carrying off the dead gladiator intact, the Baron watched them and realized she had interpreted the action correctly. The people were going wild, beating on each other, screaming, stamping. The Baron spoke warily. "I shall have to order a fete. You cannot send people home like this. Their energies unspent. They must see that I share their elation." He gave a hand signal to his guard, and a servant above them dipped their on orange bread over the box. Once, twice, 3 times. Signal for a fete. Feyd Rautha crossed the arena to stand beneath the golden box, his weapons sheathed, arms hanging at his sides. Above the undiminished frenzy of the crowd, he called, "A fete, uncle." The noise began to subside as people saw the conversation and waited. "In your honor, Feyd," the Baron called down. And again, he caused the pen to be dipped in signal. Across the arena, the Prue barriers had been dropped, and young men were leaping down into the arena, racing toward Feyd Rautha. "You ordered the Prue shields dropped, Baron?" the Count asked. "No one will harm the lad," the Baron said. "He's a hero." The first of the charging mass reached Feyd Rautha, lifted him on their shoulders, began parading around the arena. He could walk unharmed and unshielded through the poorest quarters of Harco tonight, the Baron said. They'd give him the last of their food and drink just for his company. Baron pushed himself from his chair, settled his weight into his suspensors. You'll forgive me, please. There are matters that require my immediate attention. The guard will see you to the keep. The Count rose, bowed. Certainly, Baron. We're looking forward to the fate. I've, never seen our current fate. Yes, the Baron said. The fate. He turned, was enveloped by guards as he stepped into the private exit from the box. A guard captain bowed to Count Fenring. Your orders, my lord? We'll wait for the worst crush to pass, the Count said. Yes, my lord. The man bowed himself back 3 paces. Count Fenring faced his lady, spoke again in their personal, humming old tongue. You saw it, of course. In the same humming tongue, he said, the lad knew the gladiator wouldn't be drugged. There was a moment of fear, yes, but no surprise. It was planned, he said, the entire performance, without a doubt. It stinks of Howat. Indeed, she said. I demanded earlier that the Baron eliminate Howat. That was an error, my dear. I see that now. The Archons may have a new Baron ere long, if that's how it's planned. That will bear examination true, she said. The young one will be more amiable to control. For us, after tonight. You don't anticipate difficulty seducing him, my little brood mother? No, my love. You saw how he looked at me. Yes. I can see now why we must have that bloodline. Indeed. And it's obvious we must have a hold on him. I'll plant deep in his deepest self the necessary Bindu phrases to bend him. We'll leave as soon as possible, as soon as you're sure, he said. She shuddered. By all means. I should not want to bear a child in this terrible place. The things we do in the name of humanity, he said. Yours is the easy part, she said. There are some ancient prejudices I overcome, he said. They're quite primordial, you know. My poor dear, she said, and patted his cheek. You know this is the only way to be sure of saving that bloodline. He spoke in a dry voice. I quite understand what we do. We won't fail, she said. Guilt starts as a feeling of failure, he reminded. There'll be no guilt, she said. Hypnoligation of that Feyd Rautha's psyche and his child in my womb. Then we go. That uncle, he said. Have you ever seen such extortion? He's pretty fierce, she said, but the nephew could well grow to be worse. Thanks to that uncle, you know. When you think what this lad could have been with some other upbringing, with the Atreides code to guide him, for example. It's sad, she said. Whether we could have saved both the Atreides youth and this one. From what I heard of that young Paul, a most admirable lad. Good union of breeding and training. He shook his head. But we shouldn't waste sorrow over the aristocracy of misfortune. There's a Bene Gesserit saying, she said. You have sayings for everything, he protested. You'll like this one, she said. It goes, do not count a human dead until you've seen his body. And even then, you can make a mistake.